but I want to share a video that my son took on his drone of the park so that people can get a look-see. So if you can give me a moment while I pull that up. And I'm going to share my screen with everybody. Let's see. And it's going to be brief. I'm not going to have it. I have myself on a timer, so I'm not going to cheat and exhaust it, you know, because it is my son. So this is what he was able to capture. Oh, no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Wait. Father, come on. That's not it. Uh-oh, where'd it go? That is not it. Okay, here it goes. Please forgive me. Share, share. There it goes. So this is what he did on his drone.
That's really cool.
It's cool to see it that high up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best video footage I've seen of the park. That's incredible. That's great.
As you can see, he's learning it. He just got it, so he's playing with it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh my goodness, that's great. How old's your son, Mrs. McIntosh?
He's 12 years old.
Wow.
Oh, cool. That's great. He's a pro. Our group bought a drone just last year, and it's the commercial grade one where I think you have to be like a pilot. You have to have a pilot's license to fly it or something like that, you know?
Wow. Yeah, depending on how high you want to go or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to register it, your drone.
But this footage is just as good as the stuff that we had taken a few weeks ago. So he's kind of learning it himself, you know. But when it greens up in like April or May, we're gonna bring him back out and get some more drone footage. Jay, we should try to like match the renderings, the early renderings with those angles, you know, just to be able to match it up. It'll be pretty neat.
What's that one for me, please? Yeah. So I personally want to ask Watershed about that water over there. If I can go, see, where does he go? So we have Watershed on the call. If you could take a look at that, like this over here. I think this, because this was in December, we took this picture. So that'll be whenever their presentation comes about, we'll discuss that a little bit. I can't remember if that's going to be like, I can't remember if that's going to be like a pond or something. I can't remember what it's going to be.
Yeah, we can touch on that and cover all those
cool.
during the presentation. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, this part right here.
Yep.
So that's that. I don't want to take up too much time, but I think he did enough swirling around. We're getting dizzy. All right. So
that's a great kickoff.
For allowing me to share that with everybody so we can see the aerial of the park, how huge it's going to be, what we're expecting. And so I'm going to turn it over to our watershed department.
All right, thank you, Ms. McIntosh, for having us and having the different team members here. If we have, I mean, I have a pretty cool drone shot. It's like 45 seconds. You want me to show it real quick?
That's fine.
It's pretty brief. It's pretty brief here.
For the record, I don't think we have a drone video shot that we're going to show. So
Okay.
Can y'all see that?
Did we outshine you?
Hold on. Are y'all seeing anything?
We're seeing your folder, and now we're seeing a picture of the grass.
I wish I knew how to work Zoom better. Can you see the video or anything?
It seems to be chugging along a small, slow pace there, Corey.
Okay. All right. Well, so this is the wetlands area, the constructed wetlands. This was before it got cold and kind of everything died back a little bit. But as soon as April comes around, this whole area is going to green back up and look really, really beautiful out there. But yeah, so that's my drone footage. I'll stop that. And then I will share my PowerPoint here. Okay, are you all able to see my slide here?
Yep.
Okay. All right, great. Well, this project, as a lot of y'all know, has been in the works for many, many years. And I'm sure most of the folks on the call know the location where we're talking about. But this is just off of where, on Joseph E. Boone Boulevard, where Vine Street, at the intersection of Vine Street, just south of there. You can see from this aerial photograph that it's very close to downtown Atlanta, and also close to all of the impervious surfaces and drainage and runoff issues that you get in an urban condition. This is also located in the Proctor Creek watershed, this project, and it is in the North Avenue Combined Sewer Basin. So all of this is in the headwaters of Proctor Creek. And as most of the folks know, Proctor Creek there's been a lot of attention on Proctor Creek over the years from the federal government, from the state government, from all the different partners on the line here. And it was listed as an urban federal water partnership, which allowed us to kind of tap into a lot of efforts at the federal level to really do some really cool projects in this watershed. There's also been a lot of planning in this neighborhood as well, both through Park Pride's efforts back, I think 2011 is when the Green Infrastructure Vision was published. And it identified a number of different areas within English Avenue and Vine City to retrofit and to install green infrastructure to help manage some of the flooding and drainage issues throughout the neighborhood. The Department of Watershed Management also did our own study and our own analysis in what we call the Watershed Improvement Plan, or a WIP, for the Proctor Creek watershed, that also identified some of these key areas as places where we could potentially do some pretty cool projects. So back in 2002, there was a catastrophic flood in and around this area where the park currently is, and dozens and dozens of families were impacted. Folks had to be rescued. Thankfully, nobody lost their life, but most everyone's home in that kind of bowl area was extremely damaged, and the city ended up buying out the majority of those homes in that green area right there. This area this photo is from the late 1800s, and it shows where the creeks used to be. And so the water kind of, regardless of there being a combined sewer down here, the water wants to flow kind of down through this area, which is, part of the cause of the catastrophic flooding back in 2002. And so this is a good aerial showing how many houses and families lived in this cluster of blocks here before the flood, and then before the project started in 2017. This showed that the area had been sitting fallow for about 10 years or so. And so it really took the partnership of the folks that are on this call here to really develop a vision and plan to turn the 16 acres into both a flood relief park and project that's really integrated into the surrounding park. And what you see out there today is really the the results of the Trust for Public Land and the Department of Watershed Management working together to really create this base layer. I think Jay and George might talk about layer cakes and things like that. And but right now, Watershed and TPL have basically delivered the base layer of this park design, with that pond that you were referring to, Ms. McIntosh, kind of as a bit of a centerpiece down in that lower section there. That pond is designed to flood, and during a big major rain event, that area is actually going to flood out into the Great Lawn area. So it's all going to be a managed flood condition to where it floods where we want it to flood and not in people's basements or anything. And so I'm sorry, I spilled coffee all over my keyboard yesterday, and now it's sticking on me, so I apologize. Okay, so the drainage area for this park is all the different colors that you see here. Ultimately, there's going to be 150 acres draining down to that pond, but right now we're still in that green phase. And so the first phase of this project was just completing the pond itself in the park that TPL has helped deliver. But then in the next phases, further up in the neighborhood, closer to the Georgia World Congress Center, but then also south, we're going to be doing some work in the street, where we'll actually be separating out the combined sewer to be able to funnel additional stormwater down to the pond. And so ultimately, it'll be 150 acres draining down to this pond. And so during normal conditions, that pond will be at the level that you basically see out there today. But then when it rains hard during the 2-year, 25-year, and ultimately 100-year rain event, it'll collect all the stormwater from that color area that you saw in that map before, and store that stormwater runoff, and then slowly release it back into the combined sewer system. And in addition to the pond itself, we've included what we call a littoral shelf, which is it's died back now in the wintertime. It kind of it flourishes during the growing season, but then it dies back in the wintertime. But here in April, you'll start seeing an edge around the pond that provides kind of a buffer to keep people from just like walking down into the pond, but it also provides a lot of water quality benefits as well. We also did a created wetland, what I showed in the video that you may or may not have been able to really see it, but that wetlands helps to improve water quality. It helps to clean the runoff that's coming on from the neighboring streets that are right next to the park. Also, we've installed several rain gardens out there. We'll have some educational signage that we'll be installing in the next couple of weeks that label some of these features out there. So there's 2 little rain gardens, and then the big Great Lawn is actually kind of one big rain garden. So when it does rain really hard, that whole area will store runoff and infiltrate it into the ground and clean the water before it gets down to the pond. We also have quite a few stormwater planters on the perimeter of the park that are designed to clean the runoff coming from the streets before it gets down into the pond as well. There's also some underground infrastructure that captures rainwater and will top off the pond during the summer conditions when it dries out a little bit. We also have a really cool fountain system out there that is designed to aerate the water, to kind of, there are going to be, we put some mosquito fish in the pond itself. And so that mosquito fish are basically, they eat mosquitoes, and the fountain itself will kind of help aerate the water to help keep the fish alive, and to also kind of recirculate it to where it doesn't become like a stagnant, sitting pool or anything. So here's the early renderings that this is one that TPL designed, and we're pretty close to this step right here. This is one of our renderings showing a close-up of the fountain itself. And this is just some of what the constructed wetlands looks like kind of up close, right next to the terraced little grass areas off of Walnut Street. So the wetlands will be kind of abutted up against the wet pond itself, and in the background you see the boardwalk where you'll be able to walk over the pond. And here's just another picture of the wetlands. Here's just another angle here. And so we're really excited about all the progress we've made. We know it's taken longer than what the community originally envisioned it taking. We've had a few stumbling blocks along the way. This has been a complicated project for a number of reasons, but together with TPL, we've been able to really get through a lot of the challenges on the site. And here's a look at the fountain system itself. So that'll, you'll see that water cascading through this channel here. On that upper fountain, there's a cascading waterfall that again helps to aerate that water in the pond and helps to circulate it. And with that, those are all my slides. I know I kind of rushed through that. Do you want to keep rolling into TPL and then answer questions at the end, Ms. McIntosh, or do you want me to answer any
I would
questions
like
right now?
if anyone has any questions for Watershed too, that they can have the opportunity to ask you now. We'll definitely have Q&A at the end, but if they need to, if they have something on their mind, right now, it'll be great if they want to ask any questions for Watershed.
Sure.
All right, so do we have any questions? Anyone have any questions? If you want, you please just raise your virtual hand and we'll get to you.
Not sure how to raise my hand on here, Ms. McIntosh.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Corey, for the presentation.
Sure.
For the Great Lawn area, that's interesting. So it's designed to, in the event of a big flooding event, to overflow. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is it something where if it does ever overflow into that Great Lawn area, Corey, is there a time frame that the water will be there? Does it pond for a little while, or how does that work in terms of it going back down? Just curious.
Yeah, that's correct, Daryl. It's a great question. It does pond up for a number of hours until the storm kind of passes through. So the entire design of the project is to take pressure off of the combined sewer system, to hold that stormwater for a given period of time, and then to slowly release it back into it. So it will drain down in a number of hours, with probably about 12 hours at the most. But then the Great Lawn itself will infiltrate a lot of that runoff, and it'll feed into the pond itself a little bit slower. So it helps polish it off, clean it, before it gets down into the pond. Yeah, that's the design. And just as a note, I mean, we worked with TPL's engineers and landscape architects to really integrate these two projects together. I mean, that's what's been such a success with this project so far, is just the level of collaboration that the city entity, the watershed department, has had with the Trust for Public Land, a nonprofit organization. And it wouldn't be what it was without kind of, I think, both teams working together to deliver this vision and this design for this. And then when National Monuments Foundation comes in and polishes everything off, it's going to be that much better. But as the Department of Watershed Management, I can speak for that. We're really excited about it. We're really proud of what we've gotten so far, and we're excited for the community to be able to use it and appreciate it once it's actually opened up and finished.
Awesome. Anyone have any other questions? If you can't raise your hand, just go ahead and chat out. Mr. Watt.
When will the park officially open?
Well, we're talking about watershed management right now. If you have any questions for them.
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tori.
Watershed. I was wondering, why do you guys didn't use a liner for the pond? And kind of piggyback off that, or a question, I don't know if you do Highland, so will there be tinting? Just because of the mud, I know at times it will settle, but I was wondering, was that an option? You guys decided not to go with a liner, base liner, and will you apply tinting, or is that something you do or don't do?
Yes, with regard to the liner, there is a liner under the pond, and so it is designed to kind of hold that water in place. We did do a treatment of the pond a couple weeks ago, and it did clear it up. But we had a pretty intense rain not too long ago where some of the mud around the area kind of creeped its way back into the pond. We were hoping that would be the last treatment, but it's something we'll have to keep up with on a regular basis. You know, once construction is over, we'll have much less kind of tinted water in the pond itself. But, you know, really all ponds are, you know, I have a pond in my backyard that turns pretty brown every time it rains hard, just from the surrounding neighborhood. You know, there's, you know, folks don't have their backyards completely grassed. You know, sometimes the sediment will wash off and get into the street. And so everything in that drainage area will wind up in this pond. And so from time to time, we'll probably have to do some types of treatments. Eventually, we'll probably have to muck it out, which means draining it down and demucking it. Hopefully that won't occur in the first 10 years, but it could, you know, depending on how much sediment that gets into it. But, you know, we're working with the Parks Department to maintain this whole area on the watershed side. And so Parks and they have some pretty good contractors that maintain some of the other ponds that are throughout the state of Atlanta. And the Watershed Department also has some contractors that we're going to be using to kind of just keep up with the aesthetics of it and the overall function of the pond itself.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to move on to TLP. Did I do that right?
It was close.
It's close enough.
I did, right? TPL.
It's TPL. No. So I'll get started. Jay, thanks for setting it up. So my name is George Duesenberry. I'm the Georgia, Alabama State Director for the Trust for Public Land. And I'm here with Jay Wozniak, who did most of the work for us. Just a little bit of background for me. It's interesting watching Corey's presentation. So I was actually Executive Director of Park Pride through 2010. So that Partner Creek, North Avenue Watershed Master Plan is something I kicked off and was finishing up when I transitioned to become Commissioner for the Parks Department, at which point in time I started working with National Monuments Foundation with this vision for creating Cook Park. And then I came to the Trust for Public Land in 2015. The city, I'll get into a little more. I had a different perspective. So I've seen it from my Park Pride perspective, my Commission perspective, and my TPL perspective. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the TPL perspective. We are a national organization. We've been around for 50 years. We were founded really to preserve land and create parks for people. It distinguishes a bit from a lot of conservation groups in that we're a little more urban in our character and really try to be a little more community-based. Here you see over the course of our 50 years of existence, just some of our accomplishments. We have offices in Georgia. We also have offices in a couple dozen other states around the country doing similar work, really reflecting the character of that community in terms of what we do. So we do everything from adding land to national parks, to working with schools to improve their schoolyard and making it a park during non-school use. A pilot project as you were doing here in Atlanta and working a bit with the Department of Watershed Management on that too. Next slide, please, Jay. So we've been in Georgia. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. So pretty excited about that. We've done over 200 projects, everything from Cumberland Island. Here you see Cleopas Johnson Park, Southwest Atlanta. And so again, just seeing a scale of the work we do, we're really most proud of 4 projects. And Jay, if we could to kind of highlight those. We helped create the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Park. Congress authorized it. The National Park Service had trouble getting off the ground and actually reached out to the Trust for Public Land to help acquire the property. We've acquired 1/3 of all the land that currently constitutes the park. We've put a couple $1 million into the ground. And this is actually how I first got to know the Trust for Public Land. I was working for Congressman John Lewis up in Washington, D.C. in the early to mid 90s. The Olympics were coming to town and there was no visitor center really that was worthy of telling the story of Dr. King to the world. We reached out, National Park Service reached out to the Trust for Public Land to help us find the property where we could build the visitor center that stands today and tells the story of the legacy of Dr. King. We also are very proud of our work along the Chattahoochee River. Really, that's what drove the founding of the Georgia office. We preserved 18,000 acres and 80 miles of riverfront along the Chattahoochee. And now we're working with the Atlanta Regional Commission, Cobb County, City of Atlanta, and the state to create a 100-mile linear park extending from Lake Lanier Beaver Dam to the north down to Chattahoochee Bend State Park in the south, kind of 50 miles to the north and 50 miles to the south of the city. And we were engaged also in a Beltline in terms of really helping to create the vision for parks and green space and get that off the ground. And we are a conservation organization. We preserved all the land for historic Fourth Ward Park, a number of the parks. We helped acquire property and really helped add that vision of parks and green space to the transit redevelopment plan as originally envisioned by Ryan Gravel in his thesis. Next slide, please, Jay. Which leads us to Cook Park, and we're a relative newcomer. As I said, I worked at Park Pride, I worked at the city, and in 2015, the city reached out to Trust Public Land along with the Blank Foundation and asked us to help get involved in terms of the design of the park and raising money and constructing the park. And we said yes, and we rolled up our sleeves and worked with the folks on this call to help get it done. I'm not going to go in the weeds here, but all told, we're able to raise $14 million. And as Corey said, it really has been working hand in hand with the Department of Watershed Management. And it's almost like family. You know, at the end of the day, you're family, but you may have your little arguments and your little fights, but you work your way through it. And at the end of the day, we have this great park. And Corey also talked about the layer cake, which is an analogy I like to use in trying to talk about the roles of the city, the Trust Public Land, and the National Monuments Foundation. It's probably not that clearly defined, but at its foundation, this park is a stormwater treatment facility. I think was it the Upper Proctor Creek North Avenue detention? I forget what your technical term is for it, Corey, but I think I got most of it there. And it's there to eliminate the flooding so that the folks in the community improve their quality of life, allow the redevelopment to take place, not have to deal with flooding in their own yards because the park will flood, as he said. That second layer is more the park aspects of it. And there's some overlap with what watershed management has done, but the basketball court, playground, splash pad, that was TPL. And so we were worked in designing that middle element so that it responded to the needs of watershed management in terms of preventing the flooding, while also accommodating the vision for the National Monuments Foundation in terms of the statues and the monuments to recognize the significant role of the residents of Vine City and English Avenue in the civil rights movement. So those are the three layers, if you will. At its foundation, the Department of Watershed Management are building upon that, and the National Monuments Foundation looking to build upon what we've done. So let me turn it over to Jay to talk about what we've done.
Thank you, George. So what I'd like to do over the next couple of minutes is just talk about what we've been doing and where we are right now, how we got there. So a number of you have seen this presentation already, but I think this slide is very important to always share on this project. And it's the four key criteria that has shaped this site, this park. Corey talked about the stormwater storage capacity component already. I'm going to talk briefly about just the design of the original MIMS Park that sat formerly a couple blocks away, the site's existing conditions, which all parks are based on, and then the desires of the community, the most important aspect of this entire project. So in terms of the park, the historic park, notable park that sat blocks away, this was the original MIMS Park. Many of you remember before Rodney Cook Senior Park in historic Vine City got its name, it was referred to as MIMS Park. The new MIMS Park was based on the forms and shapes from the original MIMS Park that was designed by the famous Olmsted brothers, famous landscape architects at the turn of the century, sons of Frederick Law Olmsted, who is known as the godfather of American landscape architecture. This site actually sits at where Bethune Elementary now stands, or now sits, or at least the building for Bethune Elementary. The only remnant from that park is a fountain that still exists there. It's important noting this because this is actually in our contract with the City of Atlanta, or our MOU with the City of Atlanta, that the shape of the park is based a lot on the forms and shapes of this specific site, and this was carried over from previous design efforts at Cook Park. The second thing, or the third thing actually, after stormwater capacity in Mims Park, that Cook Park is based upon is the site's existing conditions. It's a challenging site, and it's challenging because of the topography, and it's the reason why the flooding did occur there up until this point. There's a low topographic point, or it is a low topographic point within the neighborhood. There were incredible trees still on the site. There were incredible trees before construction started. But there's also a number of architectural remnants from the homes who stood there at one time. It was critical for us to respond to those existing conditions in order to make this park work the way that it should, so that it ties into the surrounding community. Now, the fourth thing that has shaped this park is what we've heard from the community. Okay. Now, many of you, maybe all of you, have been a part of the design efforts before the Trust for Public Land became a part of this project. That effort was led by the National Monument Foundation. We were able to take the information that the National Monument Foundation had received from the community before we got involved and update it. And so by no means did we start from scratch, but one of the first things that we did when we started this project was to distribute surveys to all the residents within a 10-minute walk of the Cook Park site. All the work that the Trust for Public Land is involved with from a park development perspective is based on the folks who live within a 10-minute walk of the site. So to get the responses that we did from the community was incredible, and to see what was desired allowed us to inform the design as we move forward hand in hand with the Department of Watershed Management. So notable feedback that we received, areas for active recreation, wide walking paths, shade, activities for seniors and youth, a market area, safety and security were paramount, as well as a splash pad. The splash pad was actually the top thing that we heard from families in the neighborhood. We've had dozens of community engagement activities within Vine City, and actually on site or with partner organizations within the neighborhood. That includes an activity that we had, gosh, it's hard to believe, over 3 years ago at Cosmopolitan Church, where we hosted a fall festival. It included an open house at Simpson Street Church. And, we've certainly given updates to the Vine City Civic Association over the past couple of years. But what's important to know is that the community engagement has occurred over the process of not just the design of the site, but during the construction as well. And one of those activities was actually a climbing boulder design workshop that we worked with the kids at who are involved with Chris 180 at the At Promise Youth Center in English Avenue. In addition, in terms of the feedback that we received, we heard about the need for an exercise station. We heard about an amphitheater or an outdoor space for gatherings, such as like events, like music events or outdoor classrooms. So with all this information that we compiled from you, along with our coordination with watershed management, we were able to develop a pretty dynamic design that checked the boxes in terms of what we heard and what was needed to manage stormwater in the area. This is an aerial of what the site looked like before we started construction. And this is what folks are going to see when the fences come down and the gates open up at Cook Park. Many of you have seen this aerial or this rendering quite a bit over the years. So At the corner of Boone Boulevard and Elm Street, there is a splash pad in a pretty dynamic playground, which you've observed has been in the ground for quite a while. Also, there's a restroom building, which is needed not just in the NPU parks, but throughout the city of Atlanta. So how we address the market plaza that was requested wide is that it allows festival tents to be set up on one side of the sidewalk, but then allow accessible clear space on the other for pedestrian traffic, similar to what you see at Grant Park or Piedmont Park. And then the other active recreation area is actually at the corner of Thurman Street and Vine Street, and that includes 2 multi-use sports courts, the outdoor fitness zone, and some climbing boulders that were actually funded through our partnership with the North Face. And so we're very excited to be opening these up to the public. And so is the North Face, because this is one of 6 projects that the North Face has funded across the country. And we're excited. This is actually the first outdoor climbing boulders in the entire city of Atlanta. So we've had quite a bit of activity at Cook Park, not just from the construction from our contractors, but from the partners who allow the Trust for Public Land to deliver our work. One of those donors is Delta Airlines Foundation, who helped us in the construction of the playground that you see. We've also had volunteers from Georgia Power on site to help clear out the invasive exotic species at the southwest corner of the park. And we anticipate there being a lot more interest in the stewardship of the park from volunteers outside of Vine City. And it will allow all of us to present and expose the important history that exists on Sunset Avenue and in the blocks that radiate from Sunset Avenue. So, you know, we're very excited to be presenting Vine City to those folks who are interested in the history of the civil rights movement on the west side of Atlanta. So, in terms of what residents and park users can look forward to seeing, this is a picture of the playground. This picture is actually taken from the top of the restroom plaza that I was referring to. These are the 2 multi-use sports courts that are lined for a variety of activities, not just basketball, but also soccer, foursquare, badminton, and I think it's going to become quite an attraction for residents who live within a 10-minute walk. There's also a running track around the perimeter of the 2 courts. And then this is just a close-up of the climbing boulders. The boulders actually are as high as 9 feet 11 inches, and that is as high as we could go per City of Atlanta playground standard. So George described the investment that we've made at Cook Park. There are a lot of the things that you see above ground. All the partners on this project have made this site a park. But you know, the Trust for Public Land is proud to have
Okay, I think I'm muted. I don't know if anyone can hear me, but I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. If you have any questions for TPL, please feel free to ask any questions. Okay, Mr. Graham.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I recall some of the initial renderings had an actual amphitheater set up with seats and that sort of thing, or and I guess like maybe a stage pavilion. Is that no longer going to be there? It's just going to utilize the green space, the Great Lawn for that if needed, or would there be some type of actual physical structure notating an amphitheater?
Sure. So what's great about the topography of the site along Elm Street on the west, between Elm Street and the west side of the Great Lawn, is that the topography is there with that hillside to act as a natural amphitheater. So at this time, there is no structured retaining walls acting as amphitheater seating going in. That decision was made because we wanted to see how the peace column would be coming in. And it's much easier for that work to come in later versus having to work around it now. So we're very comfortable with the topography acting as that seating. There's actually three specific areas from a performance area, one being an area that we call the Central Plaza, that's right smack dab in the middle of the park. That folks on that hill will be able to view larger activities if the City of Atlanta and their events team, approves of those performances. There's a smaller shade structure that's very reminiscent of an amphitheater roof, and then there's a third smaller area that we call the outdoor classroom that does have amphitheater seating for small educational sessions for likely kids and families.
Thank you.
Mr. Graham kind of took my question. So when you do that piece part, are you all going to come back to continually put stuff in the park once that's completed? Will we get like how, I believe Atlantic Station is a good example. They have like an amphitheater where you can just lay on the lawn and have some seating around where you can watch a movie and stuff like that. Will we have that option?
The option exists with the topography there. In terms of us coming in and putting that seating back in, it's highly unlikely.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions for TPL?
I do.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
At one time, they said it was going to be fencing like downtown, was that Centennial Park? And then also I was wondering, what about the maintenance on the bathroom? And then also, when do you guys, I know you guys don't do are not responsible for the peace column and those things. Do you have a schedule when they will start? So just those three.
Sure. So there is no fencing around the edges of the park. That's a common question that we get, certainly because folks compare the size of this project since
access on the restrooms.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So it's open during normal park hours. We're looking at narrowing that window down so that it'll only be open access to the public from dawn until dusk. Okay. it will not be open at night. One of the features that's actually really neat with this restroom building is that as patrols go around the park, like they do around every other park in the city of Atlanta, there are lights. There are 2 lights on the Elm Street side of the building that will allow patrols to see if there's actually someone in the restroom building. So when there's someone in the men's side, a light will be on. If there's someone in the women's restroom, a light will be on. So that is not a common feature in other City of Atlanta restrooms across the city.
Jay, did you mention also just there are a couple cameras in the park?
I did. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and I'll tell you, in terms of how close we are with getting this park open, those cameras are online, and I've seen the photos coming from Atlanta Police Department to say, hey, they're working and it covers everything that we need to cover.
Mr. Graham, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, they brought up another question. So just in terms of the general security, Jay, I don't know if this is for you or not. Is it just APD will be responsible for patrolling this park like they would any other city property? Because I know now we have private security during the construction phase, but once it's open, is this a regular APD function?
Yes, and it's a high priority of the Atlanta Police Department because they know how much has been invested in this project. Certainly not just from the Trust for Public Land, but from the City of Atlanta's Department of Watershed Management. There's a lot of eyes on this project already, and yep, they're aware of its opening.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, CPL. We're going to move on the agenda with the National Monument Foundation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Max Schmitz. Rodney Cook is also on the line, though it looks like he might be frozen. But I can go ahead and start the presentation. Rodney, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in when you would like. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is one of the plans for the park, and on the right side you'll see the list of 18 statues that we plan to put in the park. These 18 people came from a series of meetings that we had when we first began meeting with people in Vine City about this park, and these were 18 people identified by members of your community to be honored. And 2 of the statues are completed now. Number 1, Chief Tomochichi, and number 12, Congressman John Lewis. So Chief Tomochichi eventually will go on the top of the peace column. It'll be 115 feet in the air. Chief Tomochichi is a 20-foot tall bronze statue. And so once the peace column is completed, he'll go on the top of that, and you can take stairs or an elevator up to the top and look out over the park and the rest of the neighborhood. And Chief Tomochichi will be up at the top there facing the rising sun. The reason Chief Tomochichi is one of the first statues to be completed is that there was a statue of him in the original Mims Park. And both Dr. King and Ambassador Young have said that their ministries did not happen here in Georgia in a vacuum, and that they stood on the shoulders of Tomochichi. And the story of Tomochichi is that he greeted General James Oglethorpe in peace when the British landed here in the 1700s. And they established a very unique relationship. Tomochichi was brought over to England to meet King George, and that began a very long history of peaceful relations in Georgia up until the Trail of Tears, which was a dark moment in our history, but generally throughout, from the settlement of Georgia until the present day, we have had an exemplary history of acting PC department and watershed department right now to solidify the placement of the John Lewis statue. Temporarily, he will be right here along the sidewalk, about at the entrance of the bridge. And eventually we would like to move him to this T-juncture on the top of the bridge. He'll be a little bit higher in the air. It's a more prominent location, but we need to first develop a lighter base. So these are the two statues. You can see the sculptor, Stan Mullins from Athens, sitting here. You can get a sense of the scale of Tomochichi. And this is the initial base that we have created for Congressman Lewis. It's made out of Indian red granite, and it's very heavy. So the weight is an issue when it was proposed to us to move him to the top of the bridge. That will sort of clear the way for any sort of maintenance on the sewer system that's at the foot of the bridge. We've identified a location temporarily that's far enough out of the way that will work and can support the weight of this base. But if we can move him to the top of the bridge, it'll absolutely clear it up, which is obviously better. And so then this base will be used for one of the other 17 statues that we'll be creating. This is the design for the temporary Tomochichi base. We'd like to put him at the top of the ridge, just in front of the construction site for the peace column. Since he's completed now, we think he should be on display and let the community enjoy it and learn about the history of Chief Tomochichi. And we can put him just outside the peace column construction site. And then once the column is completed, we'll hoist him up to the top. And so we also have 4 of the other statues that are currently being sculpted. We have Dr. King, Ambassador Young, Coretta Scott King, and Rodney Cook Sr. So this is a rendering of the peace column looking out over the park. Tomochichi at the top, you can see the people up at the top. You'll be able to take an elevator up there, like I said. And then underneath the column will be a museum dedicated to Georgia peacemakers and specifically the history of the Vine City community. We have been gifted the 8,000 volume C.T. and Octavia Vivian Library. Contains arguably the most notable collection of African-American literature dating back to the 1700s. And it will be behind glazed glass for everybody to see, and then scholars can make appointments to take out the books and study them. And it will be next to a 3,000 volume King family library that currently sits in the Millennium Gate Museum in Atlantic Station. So the peace column will be our first priority for adding our buildings to the park. The second one will be the Peace Pantheon. And so the Georgia Nobel Peace Pantheon sits on the highest point of the park. If you were on the beginning of the meeting, you saw the aerial footage, and the southernmost portion of the park is largely just trees right now. It's a giant hill. And so we want to build this 2-story pedestal of the Peace Pantheon into that hill. And so you'll be able to walk from grade onto the top of the building into the Pantheon, which will contain the statue of Martin's other Nobel Peace laureates. And if Georgia were a nation, we would actually be number 5 in the world in Nobel laureates. And so the base of this, in order to put it at that spot on the hill, we have to build a 2-story base. And so that will become the Shin-Dae-yong Global Peace Institute, which will operate as a peace think tank incubator. We already have 6 international peace-focused organizations who are interested in opening up offices within this building. And the idea is that they will be able to work together and collaborate and enact a lot of the initiatives that they're currently working on from Cook Park. And then the final building that we'll be doing will sit behind the Peace Pantheon. It will be the Ambassador Andrew Young Peace Institute. It's going to also contain a notable art collection and the Zernona Clayton Civil Rights Collection. So it will have all of Ambassador Young's archives. It will have apartments for visiting scholars of peace and Nobel laureates. It will also link to the Peace Pantheon building with an underground tunnel. So the two buildings become one. The Peace Pantheon building will have a restaurant in it. So people working out of either building will be able to eat and dine in that building. And they eventually will become essentially the same building. I think that's it for our presentation. I don't know if Rodney wants to chime in at all. Otherwise, I can take some questions.
You did a great job. Thank you. And we're ready for questions if anybody has some.
Let's see. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Waters.
Thank you. What is the timelines on those construction on those buildings?
We're hopeful that we can get the statue of John Lewis in by his birthday, which is February 21st. And so we're working with Corey and Aaron and all the guys in the city to achieve that. And sorry, my lights are going out here. So, you know, any ceremony that we might be able to do in the COVID era, we'd certainly like to do it. The Tomochichi is also ready to go in then as well. They're on separate approvals. And so Congressman Lewis is at the top of the list. And so we're really trying to shoot for his birthday. So look for February 21st if we can achieve that. We're trying hard. And also Corey and Aaron suggested that higher site on the T-junction of the bridge, which is much, much better than the one that we had suggested. And so, you know, pat them on the back because it was a big, big deal that they offered that. And we have to make sure that the bridge can hold the appropriate weight of a probably marble pedestal rather than the granite pedestal that we already had ordered. But it's a superb site and you'll be able to see it from all over the park. John was particularly touched by the fact that we were doing this and speeding the statue up for him while he was still alive. And so it was great that he was able to see it and approve it. And he was very, very happy with it. As Jay just told you, they will be finalizing most of their stuff in March. We're hopeful that we can move in shortly after that to start setting up for the Peace Column. Our financing is put in place for that. We've raised $7 million for that building. We've got over $1 million in sculpture currently, and we have leases for the Peace Pantheon, so that building will cash flow. So we're working on the financing for that too. That will likely come second, but if we can get them started at the same time, we hope to do that. That would be, you know, if everything falls together, it'd be second quarter of this year, probably the end of second quarter.
Thank you. Sherry, you had a question?
Yes, I wanted to know if you're gonna have an educational component, like
a
historian on site, possibly.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, particularly
collaborations with the schools in the area.
We are, and particularly with the library, we're working with the Vivian family now about library programs because the books that they've given us are so important, and a book series. Evidently, Oprah Winfrey and C.T. Vivian were great pals, and so they're wanting to bring in Oprah to work on book clubs and that kind of thing because she's very much into that. She's also very involved in Atlanta University, so there's going to be some overlap with that. We've got some curators that we have for the collections that we have inside other than the books in the Peace Pantheon and the column. So yes, we are really investigating that and are pretty far along with it. There's also in the Peace Pantheon, K through 12 program that we're working on, and a K through 20 program that would have a peace focus on it, because your community gave the world some of the most important peacemakers in global history. And so we want to be a part of that and showcase that history in various programs that we're working together with the University System of Georgia. That's pretty far along, and we're excited about that too. So stay tuned. We got a lot going.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions that they'd like to ask anyone? That wraps up the monuments presentation. So we're open for Q&A if anyone has any other questions that they might feel that they wanted to ask and didn't get a chance to ask. Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thank you for organizing this, and for all the stakeholders on the call. Thank you so much for the presentations. Just had one final question in terms of parking for the park, and kind of what kind of thought process has gone into that, and how can we kind of ease any burden or mitigate any issues for the surrounding neighbors, so that parking doesn't overtake our areas.
Who is that directed at TPL or at us?
Yeah, any stakeholder that can speak on it. You know, I don't know, from what I've seen so far, there looks like there's a small amount of striped or painted parking spaces. If you can if anybody can speak on how many actual parking spaces are dedicated to it, and then what's the plan in terms of street parking?
I can address that, and maybe Corey can cover anything that I missed. As I mentioned earlier, you know, our parks are based on creating or responding to the neighborhood. We're focused on creating parks for folks who are going to be walking there, folks who within a 10-minute walk. However, based on the size of this park and having constructed and around the perimeter of the site. So that doesn't include Boone Boulevard, but it's also important to know that not every single parking space is actually striped. You'll notice down Walnut that both sides of the street are striped for on-street parking. Elm Street had on-street parking before. That is not actually striped, just only the accessible parking spaces are striped. And then there's parking on Thurman as well. We know that there are issues during game days and other events that take place at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I know the signage has already gone in that describes the regulations, I guess, related to that and the times related to that. But it is something that we have talked very, I guess, it has certainly been a topic of discussion that we've talked with the Department of Transportation with and Public Works. And, you know, I think if anything, with the parking, I'm excited that there are 6 accessible parking spaces on the park side of the park, which is not common in the city of Atlanta. And the plan is to park this park the same way that historic Fourth Ward Park gets parked, in the same way that Piedmont Park gets parked as well.
And you mentioned, Jay, that those signs have already gone. I'm not sure if I've seen them. So are there signs, no regulations that are up on Walnut and elsewhere? I haven't seen them, I don't believe.
They're on Walnut. I haven't seen them on Elm yet, but they are in the area.
Okay.
And they've done a great job of essentially sensitively, that's one of the reasons you probably haven't noticed them. They're very sensitively designed into the park community. And additionally, we've had involvement with the Kings and having 234 Sunset, Dr. King's house, sold to the National Park Service. And so they're restoring everything now, and they'll open it to the public. And we've been talking to Judy over at the park about additional parking under the Ambassador Young building. And so it's our hope that we can have additional parking decks underneath that building to alleviate anything else that might occur as a result of the popularity of park. You wouldn't see any of it. It'd be completely under the building and out of the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I guess the quick question for Madam Chair. I know like Piedmont Park, there are parking signs that kind of notate the hours and the regulations for on-street parking. Has there been any talk about that, to your knowledge, Madam Chair, coming through?
No, there hasn't.
About putting that up in some of the surrounding streets?
No, there hasn't been any talk. I haven't heard anything, but I do know that in regards to parking, we have been added to the city of Atlanta to get one of those like decals. You know how like Piedmont Park, when you go to their events, if someone you'll get like a sticker you could put on your car stating that you live there, and you get one for your guests. I do know that we have that, and I could give that information to you via email. But there hasn't been anything as described coming to the NPU. I haven't heard anything like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Waters.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's a very serious issue. And it bleeds over. It's not just Vine City. I'm on Jones Avenue. If we know Piedmont, that's an issue for 3 blocks in each direction. I don't know what type of, you said they haven't addressed you. I don't know if we can request 311. I haven't seen the signs that designate the same thing as well. I'm right here on Walnut. We're going to get killed. This is an international park. This is not just any park.
So
that's going, I don't know how do we. I've asked myself because I had the issue with PATH being an entrance and parking here. I haven't got too much. I have not even with ESA English Avenue neighborhood. So
okay,
I'm
so
a block and a half from
what we can do at our regular monthly Tuesday meeting, what I'll do is I'll make sure that 311 joins our call.
Thank you.
We can address that.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for any of our guests? Okay. So I personally, and most everybody knows, I believe, I am not personally happy with the naming of the park. And I really do believe that the community should have had a say in that. But, you know, I guess we can figure that out some other way later down the line. But I do want to say thank you to all of you all for participating and for giving this presentation and taking the time out of your day, of your evening to do this. And I appreciate you, Jay, for helping me with everything. So if anyone has, yes, I'm going to send, you had a question?
I wanted to know which one was Rodney.
I'm Rodney.
The other
Oh,
George.
his name says
Duesenberry.
George. Yeah.
Oh, you're Rodney. We've been looking for you.
Here I am. I was talking to you earlier about the
Okay,
education
we
stuff.
wanted to put a face with you.
Yeah, I was the one talking to you about the education stuff.
Okay, I wanted to get a glimpse of who you were. Okay.
Yeah, there's without the hat.
Oh yes, I see you. Okay.
Yeah.
He does look like George a little bit, so it works.
Okay.
All right.
So does anyone have any other questions while we have them here and present? Okay. So thank you everybody for joining. I appreciate it. Look, we finished on time, way ahead of time, 7:16. You all have a great evening, and thank you so much for joining this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.